How's it going? Welcome back, guys, at the Not Everything's Black and White podcast. I'm John.
Rocco.
And today we got a bunch of stuff to cover. One of the things that is going to be a topic, I think, moving forward is the Epstein situation. So I'm going to let Rocco lead it in, and we're going to go into some of the details of what we anticipate with Epstein and kind of give a little history on the situation, too, as well. So, yeah.
All right, so we're basically going to dive right into this Epstein stuff and even how he got started, starting with how he got started in the 70s. So basically, Epstein got his first job at the Dalton School. It was a private school with literally no degree, an elite private school. Donald Barr hired him, who has Intel ties as well. So that's a little note that you want to think of all the time. A lot of these people I'm going to tell you about, they have a lot of Intel ties. And if you recognize that name, Donald Barr, William Barr was actually Trump's Attorney General in 2019. That's actually his son. So Epstein was at the Dalton School. He was a teacher. He literally got fired after only 1 year there for harassing a girl. So it already started what he was doing already. He got fired after one year. So he was there from only 1975 to 1976. While he was there, he met Ace Greenberg. He was one of Ace Greenberg's kids was one of Epstein's students. So he met Ace Greenberg. Ace Greenberg ran Bear Stearns, basically. It was one of the biggest banks in the world. He got Epstein a job there, which is weird.
Mm-hmm. Epstein dropout.
Yeah. Epstein's role there was basically like high net worth money management, mainly for like offshore accounting, right? It's basically money laundering, right? He was fired there after 5 years for like, he was flagged for basically money laundering. He never got jailed for it or even fined for it, right? After that, he starts a company called IAG, right? The description of the company was basically, literally in its own words, he was basically a high-level bounty hunter that helps you recover assets and money. Basically a company to keep, to help you keep hiding money offshore and things like that, which made him a huge asset to intelligence networks by doing offshore banking, right? Because that's what a lot of these people do, and I'll explain that later. This was a huge asset to do like arms deals with foreign countries, because the CIA, now mind you, the CIA, Mossad, governments, they can't do arms deals themselves. It's like illegal, right? So they use people like Epstein as an asset to do these deals, so they can't be held accountable, right? They basically use them as a proxy, right? Later on, Epstein connects with Douglas Leese, who had MI6 ties, and actually he brought Epstein to the Pentagon with a meeting that we really don't even know about much, which is really odd. We don't have disclosure on that meeting, who was there, who he was introduced to. So basically he meets Douglas Leese. He's later introduced to these three people, which I think are big names. So Stephen Hoffenberg, Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine's father, and Khashoggi. So Stephen Hoffenberg, he actually ran a Ponzi scheme with Epstein, and Epstein later conned him out of $100 million, snitched on him, got him put in prison for a long time. Khashoggi was actually an arms dealer with Saudi and Israel and Iran, did a bunch of deals there. And obviously, Robert Maxwell, who's Ghislaine's father, he was financing arms deals as well. He's a committed Zionist. He works specifically on behalf of Israel's interest. He also has ties to MI6. He even sold and financed. He sold and financed a piece of Mossad spyware in the early 90s to spy on the USA, and he actually sold it to the Department of Justice.
Confirmed.
Yeah, and if you think like stuff like that doesn't happen, I just want to throw this little thing out here. If you don't think that happens, New York Post reported this in 1997 that Israel had Monica Lewinsky and Clinton's sex phone combos recorded to blackmail him, okay, into releasing Jonathan Pollard, who was an Israeli spy who worked for the NSA. He was selling secrets to Israel. Bibi Netanyahu even met with him in prison after he spied on America on behalf of Israel, and then Bill Clinton literally pardoned him. So he had dirt on Bill Clinton, and then Bill Clinton literally pardoned the guy while Israel was spying.
Netanyahu actually was the one that welcomed him back upon the time when he got in trouble in 2008 too. I think that's an interesting,
he's like a hero
footnote on it. He was brought back there and accepted back with open arms. So I think that's an interesting part of it too.
Yeah. So in '88, then Epstein renames IAG to the J. Epstein Company. Okay. He said he only accepts clients who have 1 billion or more. At that time, there were only 140 billionaires in the entire United States, okay? His only pitch was he was being an economic advisor to the super rich. That was literally his only pitch, okay? Shortly after that, he signs, now this name, Leslie Wexner, okay, the owner of Victoria's Secret. He owned other stores. He ends up in 3 short years, Epstein somehow gets Wexner to sign over his power of attorney to him. Mm-hmm. So basically Epstein, one of the richest guys in the world, Wexner signs over his power of attorney to him. He literally gives him his a bunch of homes, real estate properties. He gave him the largest private residence in Manhattan. Okay, the largest private, it was worth like $70 million at the time. Even the homes that he gave him, some of the homes he gave him, some of the real estate he gave him, were used in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial of places they trafficked children.
And okay? I think a spot to focus on, right? Like Rocco's giving you the facts on this. So a gentleman who developed a significant amount of wealth and had holdings in all these different companies and was towards the back end of his life, for some odd reason, decided to take along this guy as his mentee and then sign over essentially access to all of his wealth.
Yeah,
why would a person do that?
Right, if they're not
not his son, not his brother.
And obviously this is speculation, but you could kind of put 2 and 2 together. In my eyes, it looks like blackmail, right? Blackmail. I mean, in 3 short years, he was able to convince this guy to do that. I mean, some people don't even feel comfortable doing that with their wife, people that they spent their entire life with.
Billions of dollars.
Right, billions of dollars.
A multi-billion dollar empire.
Right, gave him, like I just told you, the biggest house in Manhattan at the time, things of that sort. So then, in '97, he meets Leon Black, who even put Epstein on board of his company. He was worth $9 billion at the time, I believe. He transferred $180 million to Epstein, right? Mind you, Epstein was never a licensed financial advisor, tax advisor.
Never sold one security.
Right.
Ever.
He even,
no record.
Yeah. He was never even well known in the hedge fund industry. Nothing. Now Leon Black claims he used Epstein to launder money, which is illegal, but that's what his claim was, that he didn't do anything else, right? And he said he gave Epstein $180 million. He said Epstein supposedly saved them $1 billion, right? That's according to Leon Black himself. So basically, after he accumulated all that wealth and properties, like the peak of Epstein was really like 91 to like 2005, right? He used this thing, he even called it himself, he called it checking the boxes. So basically he would use leverage and blackmail people to get certain things out of people, and if they didn't agree to what he did, he would, I mean, we all know, like, he had tons of cameras, tons of things, not just like not regular like security cameras. He had like audio camera in his bathrooms, in every bedroom, all those type of things. So he called this check in the box. And then in 2002, Vicky Ward of Vanity Fair starts uncovering this evidence, right, of basically all the things I just listed, right? She's writing a piece on Epstein, because Epstein's like this big guy, really no one knows anything about him,
mysterious guy,
right?
Very wealthy,
right?
With not a lot of backdrop on the story of how he collected that sort of wealth.
Right, exactly.
You figure when you have $1 billion, we're aware of the billionaires, right? We know Elon Musk, we know Jeff Bezos, we know how they got their money. It's very hard to quietly make $1 billion.
Right,
you know?
Exactly. So in 2002, Vicky Ward of Vanity Fair, she uncovers evidence basically of what I just stated, all this stuff for you, of his ties to the intel community, child trafficking, right? But the story was actually shut down by Graydon Carter, who was the editor at the time of Vanity Fair. Graydon Carter claimed later on that he was threatened by having a dead cat and a bullet put outside his house to intimidate him. So instead of reporting, Epstein basically said, I'm threatening legal action if you report any of this intel agency ties, any of my child trafficking ties. So they literally shut down the story, and they made it like a puff piece. It was like a nice piece for him in the Vanity Fair, right? And we didn't know that story. The real story of all these things didn't come out till 20 years later, basically until 2019, right? So now in 2005, he finally gets arrested in Palm Beach for child trafficking. It was Operation Leap Year. They had evidence he had interstate sex trafficking operation, trafficking girls as young as 13. And I mean, you could go from there.
That kind of walks into the spot on the timeline where I'll punch in, and this takes us to I think the most egregious part of it, and I think the part that will come out and people will be aware of it, is Epstein got a sweetheart deal. So he was convicted, right? And due to his own silliness, I mean, I guess we'll call that, but it was really leverage. His leverage plan wind up being his Achilles heel in the end, because there's documented proof. I mean, what's better to catch somebody red-handed than video proof and audio evidence, which they had. There's full collection. He did a deposition, and in the process, he then got a sweetheart deal. So he was sentenced to 13 months where he was actually able to get work release. I know this sounds crazy. When I first heard this, it was like hard to believe.
Yeah.
So he essentially spent his daytime outside of jail and went to jail to sleep at night. And also there was times where he was getting weekends off, which I think is crazy. That was a deal that was given into him by Alex Acosta, which I think is really interesting. At the time, we had him dead to rights. So I think that's the part that people will, in hindsight, focus and double back on, is the fact that we had him, and then the case that was presented in 2019 was essentially just a repeat of the evidence that was presented in 2008. How did Jeffrey Epstein, a person at the time, based off the evidence that was collected, right? They had him on a plethora of different things. Rocco, I like that he covered that, but he covered some of the financial stuff. And that was his original into this world.
Right.
And then when he was able to make his way into this world, he utilized the leverage of blackmail and sexual extortion to then scale his way up into all these different rooms and be involved with all these different politicians. It's very well documented. So you have to ask yourself, what are these people, what are they doing in the presence? Rocco, I love that he goes through and he gives you the hard-hitting just facts at face value, but you have to, at each point in the story, ask yourself why. So even at the point in 2008 when we had him dead to rights, it's because he had too much blackmail and too many important figures, so he was able to slip his way out of that. Moving forward in recent times, this is something I just heard about the other day, I kind of want to add it. So Ray Black, the lawyer that negotiated the 2008 Epstein deal, actually has just died within this last week. He died from elongated illness, supposedly. So I think that's super funny. You know me, you know the stuff I like to focus on. I like to focus on the anomalies in the story. So that was super interesting. It was actually this week Ray Black died. And at the time, Epstein was facing the circumstance he was facing. Ray Black really is just as good as the team that O.J. Simpson had to be able to negotiate that deal where there's videos of you having sexual interactions with minors, and we're talking about hundreds and thousands. He recorded every single activity. So you have to ask yourself how we ended up in this spot, and I think as time goes on, that question will continue to be pending, and I think that's one of my critiques about this administration, I would say. I'm going to be honest, my opinion on it is, obviously Trump's not involved. I think it's easy to come to that conclusion. These documents were not redacted and in the presence of people who would utilize them to do what they already tried to do. So I think it's easy and common sense will tell you Trump's not on it. However, my critique on him is not making sure we get immediate accountability, but I think he's utilizing it as a leverage tool, whether it be to complete his agenda and get the things done that he wants to in that regard, or if he's utilizing leverage to be able to pull in a larger group later. Those things will be determined at a later date, but Ghislaine Maxwell looks like she's going to get some immunity and she's going to have an opportunity to speak in front of Congress. In my opinion, I think Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton will be two of the people that are mentioned in her statement, especially if she's offered full immunity. But I guess we'll have to hold on and kind of see how that pans out. So, what else did you want to go over, Rocco? There's a few other things with Epstein.
I'll touch on a little bit more with that sweetheart deal he got. So, like you were saying, he got 13 months only. Basically, 12 hours a day he was allowed to leave the cell. He only had to come back to basically go to sleep. Basically, work release, like he said. And him and any co-conspirators in that case get immunity for what he was being prosecuted for in the secret indictment. That's never been released, mind you. This indictment has never been released, right? And while he was negotiating that plea deal, he went to Israel, which, listen, I just want to state, this doesn't make me anti-Semitic or anything like that. I'm just stating the facts. So he went to Israel. That is weird. We also don't know if Epstein was a dual citizen, if he had dual citizenship. They don't even disclose that type of stuff to us about Epstein. That's why this whole thing is odd. If you keep hiding even little things like those details, obviously it's going to raise eyebrows and we're going to be like, what's going on here, right? So while that plea deal was going through, he was in Israel. They have some type of extradition
process. Yeah, right? They have a process. Yeah, they have a process. So I think it's super interesting, and this is something that it was originally intended to be utilized for a process to remove rabbis that were caught having sexual activity. It was essentially the religion portion of it was insulating itself from outside attention. But Jeffrey Epstein was a person that got to benefit from this particular process in which if you are convicted or are facing any sort of crime that involves sexual exploitation of a minor or any sort of charge that involves sexual advancements in that regard, there's an actual process in which if you have dual citizenship, they'll bring you back to Israel, and America's made some sort of promise or commitment to not extradite. There's a plethora of different people that have taken advantage of this. I mean, I'm sure there's some that are unbeknownst to us, but there's people that are publicly documented and have taken advantage of this particular process, which I think is crazy. Right. Another question I have too is why did they make the deal? Usually deals are only made in the cases where the state doesn't necessarily have enough evidence to move forward, or if they think it'll be a difficult route, or in protection of the victims. But another question I ask myself is why Epstein was able to secure a deal like that. He was essentially at the time facing a life sentence. All the charges were drawn out. Yeah, he would spend the rest of his life in jail.
Yeah, so my opinion, the reason why he got the deal he got is because he's intel. He's an intel asset to all these agencies. I think Mossad, I think the CIA, I think MI6. I think he was doing arms deals as well with, like I stated before, he basically specialized in that. He learned from a young age in the 70s, and it progressed and progressed and progressed. That's what I think. Just to touch on a few more things. So, the non-prosecution agreement was kept secure from the victim, so that's why he was even arrested again in 2019, because the victims, it violated the Crime Victim Rights Act. So that's the only reason he basically got recharged for the same charges after that sweetheart deal, because it was such a ridiculous deal that the victims were like up in arms, like what happened?
Yeah, they essentially sealed it so the victims didn't have access to know how things panned out, which I think is crazy. One of the things I want to go over too, because I think sometimes, especially with the Epstein situation, I think the majority of us have woken up, right? The red pill crowd is kind of pretty obvious when you look at the financial tracking. The finance part always tell the story, but being able to collect that amount of wealth, you almost have to assume someone's doing something nefarious. Without any sort of business, it's impossible to make $1 billion quietly. So I think one of the main focuses that I want to also focus is the fact that what we talk about all the time, especially in regards to Israel. I mean, one thing we can say definitively, and I think it's starting to become public knowledge with some of the other bigger influencer platform like Tucker Carlson and some people like that basically Israel's main claim to fame is espionage. That's what they're good at. Espionage and blackmail is their claim to fame. That it's not conspiratorial to say that. It's just the nature of it, and that's why we work with them. When they say Israel's our greatest allies because we share intel information.
Yeah, the greatest spy campaign.
They have the greatest spy campaign, and you do things like honeypotting, right? The tactics that were used in the Soviet Union, where you had what is honey? What is a honeypot? So that's when you take female, usually, right, and you utilize sexual exploration to lure in victims and get them to be in compromising positions where you can take videos, or you create situations where you can collect information. And it's a very valuable tool that has been used historically throughout time. I think one of the greatest things is the fact that the FBI was founded on blackmail. J. Edgar Hoover was the person essentially founded the FBI, utilized blackmail. That's public knowledge, and historians would agree that he utilized blackmail to essentially retain power for the 4 decades that he was the FBI director. It's documented as well that he actually used blackmail on JFK. So JFK, it's widely known that he had relations outside of his marriage. The one that I can think of specifically is his relationship with Marilyn Monroe. Hoover was well aware of it. And what Hoover used to do is he would set up these situations. So much like Diddy and Epstein, he would have parties where homosexual activities would happen between high-ranking government officials and high-profile males, right? And at the time, we know what it was like and what the public perception of was. It was against the social norms. So that's a pretty big deal. And he utilized videos and photos, and some would even say that's a little more research needs to be done for something like that. But if you look into it, many people believe, after people dissecting some of the things that he was able to accomplish, is that he used blackmail on all the presidents. At the time of him being in power, J. Edgar Hoover was the most powerful person in the country for 30, 40 years. And he was able to do that by blackmail. Blackmailing people like JFK had a lot of validity to it. He utilized that to kind of extend JFK's relationship that him and his brother had with the mafia, and that's well known too as well too. One of the things that he gets critiqued by I think Hoover did a lot of great things. I think he was brilliant, but he utilized blackmail strategically to be able to really push forward the agenda and establish the majority of the intelligence agencies within the United States. So that's what it's founded off. Our intelligence agency and FBI were essentially founded on the same thing that Jeffrey Epstein was kind of being a part of. It's a powerful tool. What's more powerful than money, power, war, blackmail, right? How much is a video worth of you with your significant other? And then a better question is how valuable to you is a video of you with someone who is not your significant other?
And probably underage.
And
you might not even know about it.
Or the opposite sex.
Right. Or you might not even have known about it at the time that they were underage. He could blackmail you and then be like, yo, that girl was underage afterwards. And then all of a sudden you're scrambling. Then he's like, well, you're going to do this, this, and this for me, yada, yada. Now, everything that we laid out for you, you can make a case, right, that maybe he was so great at money laundering, because a lot of obviously billionaires always are laundering money and things like that. You can make a case for that, right? Maybe he was just so great at all these people trusted him with their money and all those type of things, right? What you can make a case for, which I don't think, is after he basically has 40 women come out in 2005 and he gets that sweetheart deal, anyone that dealed with him after that, I think should be looked into.
Correct.
Very, like a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
a
so
lot.
For instance, Barack, this guy Barack, he was the ex-prime minister of Israel, actually, in the 80s. He was ex-prime minister of Israel. He was actually introduced by Epstein by another ex-prime minister of Israel, which is odd, right? And he stayed at Epstein's house for a few weeks in 2015. He also brokered a meeting. Epstein also supposedly brokered a meeting with J.P. Morgan and the J.P. Morgan CEO and Bibi Netanyahu. There's literally an email where the J.P. Morgan CEO emails Epstein and says, hey, we got the meeting with Bibi, or we got the meeting with Netanyahu. And Epstein goes, to my surprise, surprise, surprise. Basically saying that he got
one thing I wanted to add too, I think it's great that you added J.P. Morgan. Another thing that we could wrap our head around, right, and like kind of grasp, because it's something that's on record, is the fact that J.P. Morgan paid out a very hefty settlement to the victims of the Epstein, of Epstein, which I think is a damning fact. So J.P. Morgan, there was enough evidence, right, in a civil scenario where banks don't pay people. I work for a bank. We don't pay people that we don't have to pay, especially in the case of a lawsuit. You try to battle back and forth with a bank, chances are you're probably going to lose the battle. So I think it's super interesting that J.P. Morgan, on paper, financially paid out the victims to Epstein.
Right.
It would make you also have more questions too as well. There's more questions than answers.
Okay. Yeah, a few things I want to add. So, in my opinion, and this is the thing I want people to realize. This isn't the first, like Epstein isn't the first guy that's done these type of things, right? So the CIA really never ever usually charges their own. That's why it makes me feel like he's CIA or some type of intel, right? Just to give you perspective on this, this was reported in BuzzFeed News in 2021, right? They reported on declassified CIA files. There was 10 intel officers who were committing crimes of pedophilia, but only one guy was ever convicted. And he was only convicted because he leaked classified information. They hold leaked classified info being like leaked classified info to them is up a higher regard of like betrayal to them than literally pedophilia. Some of these kids that these intel agencies were doing things to were as young as like 2 to 5. Okay, so your intel agencies for decades have turned a blind eye to this. They're more upset that their sources and methods would be revealed in the prosecution, like in a courtroom. That's why they never charge these people, because their sources, like I said, and their methods might be revealed in court, right? So basically, to tie this together, what we need to see from the Trump administration. So I think the Trump administration has really handled this poorly thus far, in my opinion. I think even some of the things that Trump has said, the way he said it, like, oh, you guys are still talking about Epstein, like, dude, read the room, all right? Like, this is a big deal to people because it basically sets a two-tier justice system, which America's not supposed to be. You're setting, this guy's obviously committed heinous crimes, and obviously he's dead, right? Things of that sort, but there obviously was more people involved with this. I mean, I laid out a bunch of people he was involved with. Now, were those people doing incriminating things? We don't know that, right? But one thing I want to point out is I don't think Trump himself is incriminated any way with Epstein, right? So the Wall Street Journal just released a report saying like, oh, Pam Bondi notified Trump in March that he's in the Epstein files. First of all, we already know from phase 1 he was in the Epstein file. Doesn't mean he was in the Epstein client list. Doesn't mean he went to the island. None of that is true. Okay. what those files first showed is that Epstein had an address book with Trump's name, and also that Trump was actually banned. This was in the file. Trump banned him from Mar-a-Lago, right, for inappropriately speaking to a young lady, and also Trump was the first person to do a deposition without having to be subpoenaed and talked about Epstein, which Epstein was very upset about, supposedly. So I don't think Trump is tied in this. I think if he was, the Democrats for the last 10 years would have pinned something on him with it.
Yeah, would have been easy
It
out.
would have been so easy instead of coming up with all this crazy lawfare, 34 felonies that which would normally be a misdemeanor, an accounting error, right? They upped to 34 felonies and it was past statute of limitation, right? So it's honestly ridiculous to think that Trump's incriminated anyway with Epstein. Now, that doesn't excuse him from the fact, in my opinion, that the way he's handled this is wrong. And obviously I like Trump, I like a lot of things he does, but he's not perfect. And I'm actually going to critique him harder than I would even Biden because I like him. I hold him to a higher standard. I expect more from him, okay? And he handled this completely wrong, in my opinion, right? So what we want to see, and I hope this happens, and they are taking the right steps now, it looks like, is we want to see the grand jury testimony, which they tried to unseal and a judge blocked it, right? His financial ties, financial records, bank records, LLC records, which New York State has, the original indictment records, also if he was a foreign and had dual citizenship, if he was a part of Intel, if he was Intel asset, and we also need Ghislaine's testimony. Supposedly she talked to the DOJ, someone from the DOJ, and hopefully we get her testimony, right? We need the flight logs. We have some of them, which Trump isn't on the flight logs, just so you guys know. Okay, he's not on the flight logs. Bill Clinton's on the flight logs. Bill Gates is on the flight logs 28 times. Mind you, they were talking about, the Wall Street Journal published that crazy thing that Trump supposedly wrote him a letter and drew a picture. Just puts this in perspective.
Which is going to cost him.
Oh, yeah.
about $10 billion.
Just put this into perspective. Bill Clinton, there was a picture, a painting in Epstein's house of Bill Clinton with heels and a dress on. But the media doesn't talk about that, but they're going to talk about a fake letter that supposedly Trump wrote. I mean, it's honestly ridiculous.
We got to make sure. Hopefully, we can put the link right here
to,
so you can
to
click
the picture.
That's just mind blowing.
Yeah.
Bill Clinton, Epstein photo.
So, in my opinion, just to wrap up this whole Epstein thing, in my opinion, I think if you release all those things, I think it will lead to us with the trafficked kids, who the kids were trafficked to, also lead to people that were money laundering, using for other things, right? My guess it's the biggest donors in both parties, honestly. I think a lot of Hollywood celebrities, I think some politicians, foreign and domestic, and other intel from foreign and domestic agencies were all doing incriminating things. That's my opinion, right? And I think maybe there's someone in Trump's ear, maybe, that I think a lot of people are on the Epstein list that weren't doing incriminating things. For instance, if you're someone like me that read a lot of the JFK files, there's 1,000 names on there. It doesn't mean they had to do it, the assassination. But the fact of the matter is if you're just linked to Epstein, like, oh, they're in the files, it could ruin your entire life. And I think Trump is trying to take that into account and weed out the people that are actually the criminals in all of this.
Correct.
Rather than just release a whole thing and it'd be like, oh, well, George Clooney, Leonardo DiCaprio, well, they didn't do anything wrong. They might have just met with him once, or, I don't know.
Yeah, it's impossible to conduct an investigation of that magnitude.
Right, and you can't criminally implicate people without doing an investigation. So we can't just release these names and like criminally implicate them, and then all of a sudden everyone's like, this guy's a criminal. So they can't do that. So that's basically my gist on it.
And I have a very similar take. I think there's two. I think Trump is a master at the art of the deal, and even though I don't like his decision to hold back and redact this information at this time, I think that there is a greater play into it. Obviously, him, Dan Bongino, and Kash Patel and all of them have looked through these documents. I think it's interesting that Dan actually made another statement where he alludes to the fact that there is still more that is going to come out, and it kind of made me feel good. It was right on time. It was right around when we filmed our last episode and released it, and it was right on the time where I kind of wanted him to push forward. I mean, especially with Dan specific, because I watched Dan, and over the course of the election, he was one of the people that I really leaned on and had hope for. Not that I even thought he'd be part of the administration, but he was a person that was giving us some transparency when the curtain was pulled back. Specifically, I can think of during the assassination attempt time. It was one time where he really gave us some valuable information. So I want to think the best of him. I just think that when something is this big and of this magnitude, especially an investigation, you want to make sure that you have all your ducks in a row. So I think that they're utilizing this leverage, if I'm being honest. I think that they have their eyes on certain potential people. I think Hillary Clinton. I think it might be tough to get Obama unless it's something really egregious because of them kind of confirming the immunity situation from a presidential position. I think it could be tough to do the same way I thought it was tough to do with Trump. But I think they're utilizing this leverage to either be able to complete their agenda or get some bigger fish down the line. I think another thing that could be a possibility, and it seems like nobody is really talking about, is the fact that it could be just the fact that this situation is so big and it's so many people involved and it's all the billionaires, right? And it's everybody that you think it is, and that what would happen if these people knew, right? If that big of a conglomerate, if that much money, if that much power was consolidated and you were going against that, what do you think you have the risk of losing? Your life, right? So I think part of it even is the possibility is the fact that he just got so spooked by the information that he saw, which I hope that that's not the case, but it's something that you have to take into account. A person that is coming off of a year that he had, and within the last 365 days, there's been multiple assassination attempts on his life. And who even knows, unbeknownst to us, there's other opportunities and other scenarios where he was in a high pressure scenario where his life or safety was at risk. I think it's something to be taken into account. This could be a matter of life and death, literally. Yeah. So, food for thought.
A few more things. I'm sorry. So, I agree with some of that. That it can be used as leverage. But in my opinion, I don't care.
Yeah,
I want accountability.
I agree.
I want these people arrested. I don't care if it brings. I don't care if it brings down the biggest don't. I don't care. I want accountability. That's what I voted for. I want accountability. Like I don't care about any of that. And I just think, like I said, I think they handled it so bad. Like with the memo that the DOJ released, that he wasn't blackmailing anyone. He wasn't. He didn't have a. He was working alone. And that he killed himself. And then they released that video in the prison that's literally was doctored. That's unacceptable. Like I said, I'm gonna hold him to a higher standard. If Joe Biden did that, I would be making fun of him. But this is Trump, and I like a lot of the stuff he does, and I'm holding him to a higher standard that he needs to do the things I stated. The grand jury testimony, all those files need to be released eventually. You know, take your time with it. Obviously, there's no rush, but eventually we need to see some accountability.
We need transparency.
And I'm not saying Cash Patel and Pam Bondi are terrible people or a bunch. You know, I like all of them, okay? More Cash and Bunch, you know, I like. But they've been doing some good things. Like Cash arrested a bunch of child traffickers. Cash, the FBI, since he's been in. Under Biden, I don't think any of the top 10 most wanted people were arrested in the entire United States under Biden. I think 8 of the 10 have already been arrested under Cash. So he's doing good things. It's not saying that they're not doing good things, but we need this story to eventually come to fruition and release those things that we need. And that's all.
And I think that's a great spot to put a pin in it. But I want to finish it with that, and I agree with Rocco. If it means the whole republic crumbles, if it means whatever it means we lose, if it means that every single person that we watch on movies and TV, every single one of them, because this is bigger than that, and I think the country is in a position.
You can't have a two-tier justice system.
You can't have a two-tier justice system, but more than anything, I think it really beats down on the morale. Think about the fact that the majority of the country is aware in modern times that someone was a pedophile, and that people that are in positions of power, or people that are in Hollywood, people that are in all of these roles, potentially could be doing egregious things towards kids. Think about what that does to the psyche of the average person.
It makes you hate your country.
It makes you hate your country. It makes you hate your neighbors, and it builds an image of this deplorable world that we live in. And when reality is really not that, right? I enjoy the interactions I have on a day-to-day basis. Something like Epstein being solved and there being accountability for it is good for the morale of both sides, every person in this country.
If you release those things that I stated, you'll get enough evidence that you'll at least arrest a few people, and people feel like finally there's accountability for
there has to be.
That's all.
There has to be.
That's all.
Well, with that being said, though, we look forward to hearing your feedback on it in the comments.
Yeah, let us know.
Thank you for joining us today, and that's another one.